Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Mark Bell's Power Project Podcast. This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Element Electrolytes.
You know, the cool thing is that Mark told me about Element last year. He told me how he was using it before workouts, and he does a lot of workouts fasted too. So he suggested it to me. And in the past, because I do, a lot of lifting, a lot of, performance stuff outside the gym, I thought, towards the end of a workout when I'd cramp, it's kind of normal. Maybe I wasn't adequately hydrated. I didn't have adequate nutrition. So I just drink more water, eat more food, hope everything was okay, and cramping was normal. After I started grabbing Element, I started using the electrolytes, and they have 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 potassium, 60 magnesium, all the electrolytes you need. I'd use them pre-workout, fasted, and I shit you not, I don't cramp up anymore. It's crazy. And it's like the workouts all go really well, even though I don't have food in my system. It's really, really crazy. The cool thing about Element is that they have a lot of great flavors. My personal favorite is raspberry. And you can just put a packet in the water, drink it, do your workout. It's easy. It's simple. It's just, it works. Okay. So make sure that you're not just drinking a lot of water to get yourself hydrated. You're getting enough electrolytes in your system before you train. It will make a massive difference to your performance.
Yes, you guys got to take your workouts to the next level by picking up some Element Electrolytes right now. Head over to drinklmnt.com/power project to make sure you guys check out the bundles, because when you buy 3, you essentially get 1 free.
Getting that element in there.
I haven't tried the Element and the protein combo in the coffee.
Oh.
I tried the Element and protein, which is really good. The chocolate element and the protein, but not with coffee. So I'm excited for this.
Yeah.
Hey now.
Yes.
We're good to go.
Yes.
All right. So Nsima made a concoction over here.
Oh yeah.
Concoction.
He's got coffee. He's got some Dutch Bros coffee.
I'm gonna add some Dutch Bros to it.
He's got some Slingshot protein in there.
Yep.
And he's got some Element.
Chocolate salt
Element.
I'm still surprised at how much flavor that little packet has, and you only did like half. So that's even better.
Yeah, that's what I usually recommend to people, is just try half of the chocolate packet in some protein.
That's just good.
Pretty damn good. Or in protein and coffee, like Nsima did.
For all the listeners.
Yeah, I was going to say, people listening in their car love that.
Cringing.
Yeah.
Man.
We're going to talk about cow farts today.
Yay.
Yeah, get to the bottom of this whole thing. Talk about regenerative agriculture with Anya Fernald, who is she's a bunch of stuff. She's formerly a chef. I don't know if she'd call herself a chef, but I don't know what the qualifications are for that, if you have to go to school or whatever. But
Yeah.
I know she went overseas and has been baking and cooking and doing all kinds of stuff for a while. And then she also is a part owner of Belcampo, which is a regenerative agriculture farming facility. And I'm excited to talk to her about it, because I don't really understand how it works, but it leaves a positive footprint on the planet rather than a negative. And so it'd be great to like hear more about that. Like, what does that mean? I have an idea of what it means. I believe it means that they're grass fed and they're grass finished, but it's to my belief that all cows are grass fed. That's my understanding. But then I think they feed them corn for a large part of their life as well, to try to get them bigger and make them fatter. And that has a negative impact on the cow's stomachs. And because of the negative impact it has on their stomachs, it leads to more gases. But also I think there's some other things at play here. I think that they do stuff to the land, and they have the cattle go on certain parts of the land. And I think they kind of do so in kind of a formation. And by the time they get back to a particular chunk of land, I think they're, taking a crap on it and eating on that land and so forth. And then they move on and they go to the next spot. And so the cows, and my understanding too is and she, might have a totally different perspective. I believe it's pretty hands off. I think the cows just kind of run the farm themselves. I think once you get it going, I'm sure it's probably really hard to figure out, how to get the whole thing started. But my understanding is once you get it going, that the cows will take care of the rest.
Yeah. What I'm wondering is, like, because environmentalists, whenever they talk about farming and the meat industry, it's always something that's going to do something negative to the environment. They're always talking about the long-term negative effects of eating meat and farming cows, etc. And I wonder if I'm curious because like she's probably heard that, like if this is the solution to that problem.
Yeah.
Like I remember you were mentioning yesterday how this could actually be something that helps the environment rather than actually hurting the environment.
Right.
So that'd be pretty cool to dig into that because I know nothing,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
literally zero about it.
And it seems like that's not usually, but for vegans and vegetarians that are so pro not eating animals, it's like, oh, it's bad for the environment.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not.
Well, also
I don't
too,
know.
we're already there, so people will say, oh, we need
Right.
like a vegetarian, diet, or we need but we already eat like 80% vegetables because that everything in the grocery store has some sort of vegetable in it or plant has some sort of plant in it.
You're talking about we, do you mean like the general population or us? You mean Gen Pop? Or I'm confused.
I guess I mean America probably.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe I'm not so sure about everybody else, but sugar is a plant.
Yeah.
You know, and then
Are you-
and then there's vegetable oils.
That's what I was going to ask
and
if you're counting that. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I think it's 80% of the stuff in the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
You just wouldn't have hardly any food in a grocery store if it was
You're right.
actually Whole Foods. There wouldn't be much in there. So yeah, I just find it all interesting. It's actually like a lot of stuff too. Like I'm not on one side or another, and I kind of hate some of this stuff sometimes. Like I don't consider myself a Republican. I don't consider myself a Democrat. I'm probably like millions of other Americans where, I've selected a certain person or selected a certain thing. But then unfortunately, the times that we're in, people kind of think that means X, Y, and Z about you. And I don't agree with all the different policies and all the different things, but even when it comes to like, I do like eating meat, but I don't hate people that eat vegetables. I don't have any, I don't think that it's the best way to try to build the best physique. So when people ask me about it from that perspective, I just usually say, I think there's better, more convenient ways. I'm also not going to try to change your beliefs. However, I do think it's good that you research stuff because, cows versus soybeans, I mean, you'd have to really weigh out. There's a lot of negative talk about the farming processes of soybeans and other things like coffee. I don't know what the practices are, but these things they take over massive amounts of land, and they also pull resources from what we do. So they're not necessarily they're not things that aren't harming anything. And when you have even like a garden, a lot of people that have gardens that I know that are gun owners, they shoot squirrels, they shoot raccoons, they shoot shit that ends up, right? Even somebody that's kind of more on the side of like, hey, well, I'll eat some eggs here and there. People that have chickens, they raise their own chickens. They kill coyotes because coyotes kill their chickens. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like there's always something's getting harmed. And if you have a massive field of soy or whatever the hell it is, you're probably killing a lot of other animals or taking their land to put your crops there. I mean, this happens with people. We remove people to get land that has resources. We remove animals, right? Like we just take over. We make borders and boundaries and walls and all kinds of stuff. And the thing just repeats itself. So they're not really, if you really actually are to really think about a lot of this stuff, a lot of it doesn't appear that there's one morally better way than another. Yeah. But again, I'm not here to try to change your beliefs, that you believe what you want to believe in.
Mm-hmm. You said that maybe it may not be best or optimally for a physique, but what about just overall health? Like I've never really heard you like mention your thoughts on just for general being healthy.
I think the good thing about vegetables is that they prevent you from eating meat. So I am in recognition of that you could eat too much meat, but I would also just say, when I say too much, I just mean an abundance of calories, abundance of energy, mm-hmm. and also trying to keep in mind that people have a more regular style diet. The person that we're talking about eating too much meat, I wouldn't be concerned if it was somebody that primarily ate meat, like if it was like Ron Penna or something, or it's Dr. Baker. I wouldn't really have a concern with them. Where I'd have a concern is somebody that does like a keto diet, or somebody does a carnivore diet, but then they also like cheat pretty frequently. They overeat pretty frequently. They make some bad choices, maybe more frequently than necessary. And then also just our general population. Our general population could really do really well having a protein shake every single day, and having a big salad every single day so that has a reasonable dressing on it. So that they can ensure that they have like 2 decent meals every day, along with having like a steak. And that would be 3, that would be 3 good meals in a day, or not meals really, but 3 different times of eating for a particular day. But yeah, I don't think vegetables are bad. I think that if you look at people that live really long, they're usually really, really small. People that are really, really super duper small usually don't eat that much protein. But, I don't want to go through my life small. I want to go through my life jacked. So I need more protein.
Maybe 100 years old and jacked. But I mean, yeah, we've said this before, and you've said this before on the podcast. I mean, comparing a vegan diet or a vegetarian diet to the standard American diet, it's way better for health. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Like you can't debate that. Like if someone's doing that, okay, yeah, they're going to be healthy. Will they be the strongest athlete? Potentially not. Will they be the biggest athlete? Potentially not. So, I mean, if you care about that, you might want to take another route, maybe.
Yeah, and if you really care about it, you might find a different route. Like you might find a slight, alteration. You might be able to make room for different types of protein powder or something like that. And you can still, there's people that look awesome.
There are a lot of bodybuilders.
Yeah. There's like one guy who I think has won the Olympia a couple times, right?
Which Olympia?
I think it's physique. I think maybe.
Really? The NPC Physique Olympia?
I think so.
Oh, wow.
Little Google search.
I forget what the dude's name is. He's he's got a name that's kind of hard to pronounce.
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, there's a handful of guys that compete on a high level that, look awesome. I think that in terms of like how long we live, I think that the vegetables just don't have a lot of calories. So I actually think that that's a plus. Like if you can chew on something that doesn't have a lot of calories, and it can assist and prevent you. First of all, it doesn't have a lot of calories, but it also has fiber in it. So if it can assist you to not overeat,
get full,
then we're on the damn right track, I think. People talk about autophagy and things like that. Autophagy, the kind of regeneration of new cells, those kinds of things don't only happen from fasting, they also happen from not eating an abundance of calories. So I think it's really useful. I mean, again, just think about people that are in your life that that are old. And, some of the oldest people that you run into, they're very, very small. So, I mean,
my grandma's a tiny lady.
Yeah, right.
Such a small lady.
Yeah.
She's like this tall.
Yeah, you gotta be. You gotta be little. She said she's 98 or something.
She's
right?
98. Yo, yeah. She's just walking around this tall.
Right. Well, and for her, she probably even maybe when she was younger, because she's smaller, she probably just has a tough time eating a lot.
Yeah.
I've mentioned this before on the show too. I think that men die earlier than women because I just think that we eat more. I think that like eating and dying, I think are somehow weirdly in some way connected. I don't know.
But you know what, man? I have this like strange resistance to that idea that like, I mean, yeah, we're all going to die, but like, I feel like if we keep active like we are,
right,
and we keep our body feeling pretty good, and like, yeah, as you get older, your bones and stuff, you're gonna feel a little creaky, but I feel like if we do that, we can live a pretty like damn long time. I think we can get into our 80s and 90s pretty successfully, but maybe no, you're right. I
know what you're saying. It's about living. It's not about dying.
Yeah.
Because if you could live to be 90 and you had to compromise a bunch of things that you like to do, that kind of sucks. I'd rather be out by 80.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
a Google search doesn't pull anything up on any like vegan bodybuilder winning a major event. One that just randomly popped up was Mr. America in 2014 by Barney Duplessis.
There's a guy with a not something. And then, I don't know how to say his name. I'll butcher it.
And somebody in 74 who claimed they were vegan won Masters. But yeah.
I know there are a few pretty high level like competitors that do that. I don't know about
maybe
if
he
they're
won
in
a
the
vegan show.
I don't know if they're in the NPC, but I know there are some in like those natty organizations.
Yeah, what's this dude's name?
So
yeah, I can't find it. I mean, again, same guy, Mr. Universe in 2014. Somebody's yelling at the podcast right now saying that there's somebody out there.
Well, if you know him, comment. Let us know.
I've tried to get him on the show before, but he like thought I was going to be like mean to him and stuff. But I'm
We're
like,
not mean to vegans.
I remember that.
We love you guys.
Oh shit, I can't remember.
no, I'm like, dude, I want to like find out more.
Give you props. All right.
Move the Dutch grass.
He's been
away
doing it
from
for
us.
like a while. I think he kind of started out that way.
Oh, that's right. You can see yourself now.
Just
My
chill
bad.
like that.
Okay, here Anya's coming in soon.
Just keep it there. It's Anya.
There she
Hi.
is. Hey.
Yo.
Hey, great to have you on the show today. Appreciate you coming on. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me, guys.
Yeah, thank
Yep.
you. Let's just dive right into some of this. I know that you have a history of cooking, and you cooked overseas and stuff like that, and now you're owner of this farm, and you guys use what's called regenerative agriculture. We here on this podcast don't know much about it, and I don't think our fans know much about it either. So I'd love to learn more about it. I know that a lot of people have concerns about eating meat and their overall health, and then also the health of the planet. And so maybe you can explain a little bit of what regenerative agriculture is.
Well, first off, I'm actually at our farm. So right out the window here, I'm looking out at regenerative pastures. We're up in far northern California on the border of Oregon. So broadly, regenerative agriculture conceptually, I'd say for people in the fitness industry, a way that I might think about it is kind of like analogous to how one might take care of one's body. So if you were heading into a super brutal week, Mark, and you're like, okay, I gotta really crush it, and you tell your friend, I'm gonna drink a ton of coffee, I'm gonna take a bunch of these crazy pills, I'm not gonna sleep, and then I'm gonna get it all done. Or you might say, I'm gonna book a lot of long nights of sleep now. I'm gonna eat really good. I'm gonna keep my workouts going all week long, right? So which one is your friend gonna recommend, right? The one that's like the latter, where you end up a human. And that's kind of the difference in the style of agriculture. If you're thinking about agriculture in a short-term mentality, you're like, okay, how many tomatoes can I get out of this right now in the next season, the next 2 seasons, as opposed to thinking, what's this pasture going to look like in 30 years? And the question might be, who cares, right? I mean, who cares? Because fundamentally, tomatoes are great. There's a lot of land on Earth. There's a lot of water on Earth, right? So there's ways that we could probably make this work. And the issues are really around carbon sequestration, the fundamental issue. So carbon leaves the soil and leaves the earth when soils are disrupted, right, and tilled. And when you till, you actually break this dense network of micro and macro root systems below the earth. It's kind of similar, like in human health, to a microbiome, right? So you know, like you don't get the flu when you've got that great microbiome and your gut's in great shape, and you do get things when you've been eating bad and traveling and not, doing the right things, and your microbiome gets out of whack. So it's really similar in ag. So when you actually keep this healthy microbiome in the soil, these healthy roots, rhizomes, this massive bacterial culture, et cetera, in the soil, you're going to end up with a better carbon sequestering land. And the other piece of it is farms like ours in regenerative, we don't till the land. So we don't cut it. We don't break the earth. And that also increases the amount of carbon that's held because there's actually these root systems aren't broken. The way carbon actually ends up physically in the land is that every single root has tons and tons of little teeny nodes, and those deposit carbon in the earth. So you want to keep big, healthy root systems intact to keep carbon in the soil. And that's what regenerative focuses on.
And what's the difference between that and just cows that eat corn?
Well, the cows that eat corn, there's a lot of layers. So piece one is regenerative, how we farm the pastures, right? And that also presumes that cows are eating grass, right? Corn is a maladaptive food for cows. And what that means is that it's not the diet that they evolved to eat. You and me, we're monogastrics. We have one intestinal tract. We evolved eating nutrient-dense foods. Other animals that are like us are pigs, chickens, monkeys, right? Those are monogastrics. Ruminants, lamb, deer, elk, these are animals that evolved with a lot of stomachs that were designed to process like the food that the predators like us left behind, okay? It's really low value food. If you and I were to eat grass for a week, we would be in the hospital.
Yeah.
Okay, so the cows are different though. They've got these 5 stomachs. They take this super crummy, low nutrient density food, tons of fiber, and they process it slowly through these 5 stomachs. And they can turn it into super high quality protein, which is magic, right? But when you feed them that diet, they grow naturally. They're eating a natural diet, and they grow, they put on musculature and fat in a natural kind of time frame. In modern ag, we want things to go faster. We want more fat. We want it to be plumper. We want things to move quicker. So if you put them on it's the same thing. Think about it. If you or me were like, okay, I'm going to eat, greens from my garden and healthy proteins and occasional whole grains, or I'm going to eat just Fritos. What would help us bulk up or just put on mass faster?
Fritos. Yeah.
So when you're trying to make cows gain a lot of weight fast, just feed them a bunch of corn. And there's a couple things that happen. One is it's super nutrient dense, okay? And then the other thing is totally inflammatory for the animals because they don't have the right stomachs for it. So they actually, it's kind of a thing you can Google. It's a little bit gross, but if you look inside the stomachs of these cows that are on corn, they're black and slick. Whereas a grass-fed stomach, it looks like a compost pile. It kind of smells not nice unless you're in my industry, but it smells pretty good. Smells like compost. So they're actually pretty sick. That's why there's so much E. coli in those factory farms, because the animals, E. coli makes cows sick too. So they get it when they're super stressed out and not eating the right food. They get E. coli and salmonella, listeria, all those bacteria really proliferate. And so it's not regenerative in terms of the food stuff. So if you asked why is corn-fed beef not regenerative, it's because that corn is not farmed regeneratively. Then broadly, why is corn-fed beef not so great? It's because it's the wrong diet for cows. They don't thrive on it. They gain weight very quickly, which some people confuse with thriving. But it's the same thing when you see like an obese 13-year-old, do you say that kid's thriving? Right? No. So you can't just conflate rapid early weight gain with health.
When you compare regenerative farming to what most, I guess, farms do, a lot of people are concerned about normal farming because of like what it does in the environment, et cetera. And you were talking about in terms of regenerative farming, you have to think about this in the long-term perspective, not what's my gain going to be a few years from now, what's it going to be 30 years from now. So when you moved into that, what exactly were you thinking about? Like, because I'm assuming, I have no idea, but from a business perspective and making money perspective, are you at a disadvantage doing this? But in the long term, like, is that or no?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And early on, I wasn't as radical about it as I am now. When I started the company, I wasn't like, oh, I have to be 100% organic. I have to be, I was more open to doing maybe like barley finish for beef. And then the more that I learned, the more radical I got. And it was actually motivated really by wellness. And that's because I started doing tests on the meat, omega-3 to omega-6 ratios. And it was just really clear when we gave the animals any type of grain, their omega-6s went through the roof. And so it's kind of like I wanted to create a product that was optimally supporting human wellness, animal wellness in support of human wellness. And so to do that, it's really clear when you get the animals inflamed, the meat that they produce is more inflammatory. Omega-6s are inflammatory for humans. So it was kind of a guideline, like part of it, I wasn't such a planet or tree hugger that I'm like, oh, uber alles, everything's got to be about carbon. Because I also think, fundamentally I'm selling meat. And I don't think that many people are like, oh, I'm going to buy this thing because it's low carbon. And it's like, no, I'm going to buy this thing because it's delicious and it's a cool cut and it smells great. And I look great when I serve it to my friends. There's a bunch of other reasons. You don't just do it for the environmentalism. So I wanted to check all those boxes, but really what was amazing to me was that the slow growing product tasted way better, but also just had much, much better nutritional profile and also higher density of protein. So, things like our eggs have something like 3 times the protein of a conventional egg, but it's the same calories, right? So it's crazy to me that you think, people get freaked out by how much more good quality meat and eggs and stuff cost. It's like, but you get way more protein. You actually it's a healthier product. You get more bang for your buck and you get a greater result from that caloric intake. You guys are obviously probably less concerned about how many calories. It's probably a struggle for you to eat enough calories with how much you work out. But for many people, it's like, okay, I'd rather keep my calories under a certain threshold. So I'd rather eat more nutritionally dense food where I get I get more value for my caloric intake, right? So that was all interesting for me to kind of, and it was the first couple of years it sort of started to unfold that I was learning because I was sending stuff off to get tested and I couldn't believe it. You know, a lot of my competitors, I would come back with like a 1 to 30 omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. So that's pure corn. I also found that many people were lying. Like I would test meats that were listed as grass-fed and finished and find it had this crazy omega-3 to omega-6 ratio. And then in our meats, we did some barley finishing and it immediately went from like a 1-to-1 ratio to a 1-to-15 ratio with 2 weeks, 3 weeks on barley. So I couldn't really conscionably make that trade-off. But the question you raised initially was just, this is a massively more expensive proposition. And that's the challenge I face every day, which is I am producing a product that costs 2 to 5 times I don't know the exact ins and outs of conventional, but it's somewhere like 2 to 5, 3 to 5 times, but I can pretty much only charge like 30% more for it. Right. So there's the squeeze is that operations like ours, we really are, we're challenged to do more things with the beef. So the way that I recoup that is I do things like bone broth. So I sell every single part at a premium. Right. So there's ways that I carve margin out of the animal, despite it being more expensive.
A second ago, you had mentioned the differences between the stomachs of a grass-fed and corn-fed cow. Like you can actually see it, the difference. But in some of the corn-fed cows, you actually literally can see it with one of those like port things that's like really disgusting. Does anything like that ever happen with a grass-fed cow, or is that something that only happens to corn-fed because it is not their diet, or not? It shouldn't be a part of their diet, I should say.
Well, you know, you just see it. I see this sort of fetishization in American culture, like more in the culinary culture, but people like talking about these big, super marbled steaks, right? You see it over Instagram and they're like, oh my God, like that's like so incredible. Look what I'm throwing on the grill. And I see that and I say, that's just inflammation. You know, I see that and I see like a sick mammal. You know, I see a sick, inflamed, diseased flesh. So I have a really different lens on it, but you're absolutely right there that there's those cameras where you can peek into the animal. And those are typically, I mean, the thing you should know too, guys, is that particular one that I'm aware of is at Davis, which is, you know, it's a great, you know, university here in California, but it's absolutely beholden to the corn-fed industry. I mean, the amount of vested interests, there's tons of research out there showing that corn-fed animals are absolutely terrific for the environment. And you look at where they're from, it's like Oklahoma State. It's like, well, who's paying the bills there? You know, so unfortunately, we don't have and keep in mind my sector of the market. I mean, I'm like a big player in grass-fed and I'm nothing. I'm infinitely tiny. Our slaughterhouse on a big day, we have our farm, we have our own slaughterhouse, we'll kill like 40 beef in a big day. A normal large-scale slaughterhouse is 600 beef an hour.
Oh, Jesus.
Okay, so the order of magnitude, so there's just not that much research. That's why I'm like out there sending samples to the lab and like, because the USDA, and it's not necessarily like I don't even think it's as much of a conspiracy that they're not serving the grass-fed industry. It's just if they're serving the agriculture industry in the US and 99% of the agriculture industry is doing things in a certain way, they're going to focus most of their research around that. So there's not a lot about it. So I had sort of like the thing about the rumens being black, I actually learned from a grad student who was working in the conventional industry who's like, oh, these look so different than what I've been seeing where they're black and they smell foul. And when he came to our plant, he's like, it smells great when you open, because when you actually slaughter, you check the inside of the rumen, so you open it up. So he was there for that and mentioned that. So I'm learning things as I go, but there's not like a lot of literature about the alternative industry right now.
You're basically saying your shit don't stink, right?
Exactly. We can talk about manure and emissions too. But. Give us
some of your background. Do you have like what gave you confidence to like run a farm? It seems like it'd be so difficult to try to figure out.
Yeah, I think it's like one of these challenges that you don't realize until you've gotten into it, how hard it's going to be.
You say, oh, fuck, what did I get myself into?
Every day. No, I mean, now we're a big enough company that we have, I mean, it's also hard for me. I'm a youngish woman. I'm not from an agricultural family. I have sort of radical ideas about health and nutrition. I'm really into fitness and wellness. And
do you get this a lot? Do people say, can I speak to the owner? Like, is the owner here?
Yeah.
You're like, no, it's me. Like, no. Like, where? Okay, quit kidding around. Where's the owner?
The people who really came up with this, I'm like, no. That's been interesting. It's really the comfort for me, guys, is that what I'm doing is something that small landholders have done for centuries. I'm not like inventing, and that's one thing that like in COVID has been sort of a sense of like the grace of God for me to wake up every day and be like, well, at least I'm just selling meat. Like, I'm pretty sure that's not going anywhere, right? So a lot of what my practices and my work has been about uncovering the old way of doing things and bringing that back with some tweaks and some changes, and then it's also, we're 8 years in, okay? And this brand was always conceived of as something that would be a very long-term play. This product, like, it's a long-term, it's like sort of a legacy project. We're not like, oh, I'm going to make a natural granola bar out of a bunch of organic things that you can buy in that, like a lot of these kind of like world-changing natural brands are fundamentally just buying the same stuff and putting in a really cool new formulation, which is great. There's no disrespect for that whole pathway, but our whole vision, and this is me, myself, my business partner, have been to really like have this longer term approach. And so the early days of this, though, I can tell you just, guys, for giggles, like some of the idiotic mistakes that I've made. I mean, I had the first USDA certified free range organic rabbit program because I thought it was, rabbits are super efficient protein. And where I am here, you can see out the window, it's extremely remote area in Northern California, and we're right on the edge of the Trinity Alps. So you put a bunch of rabbits, which have like zero evolutionary instinct, like dumb animals, and you put them out in a pasture with like a tiny little electric fence around them. And then there's mountain lions and golden eagles and coyotes. And it was just like the smorgasbord every night of animals just coming and predating. And I was like giving myself gold stars. We're like, oh, I did the first regenerative, like free range organic rabbit program. And then we'd have, it was inhumane. We had like 75% mortality because these poor rabbits, like, just, you can't do that at the base of the Trinity Alps, obviously. So listen, my naivete definitely brought me some early punches. And fortunately, now I have enough of a team around me that's done that. I mean, the guy who actually runs our farming operations is a 5th generation California rancher. Oh, wow. And he is like, this is the future. Like, because, his whole family operation has struggled with differentiation, right? Like trying to find a way to get people to pay more for the right quality product. And what we've done well is that we've differentiated, we've told our story well. So that's really where I've been able to lean in. And then fortunately, I brought in people. But early on, some of the stuff that we did, we're just trying to go for a purely values play and purely like kind of amazing tasting product, great for your body, great for the environment. We were definitely the laughing stock for a couple of years in there.
I'm really curious about this because I think it'll help a lot of people if you can help us break this down and understand it. When a lot of people go into the store and they look at meats, you mentioned like the marbling, right? And they'll see a really high fat cut of steak that's maybe not that expensive, and they'll be like, okay, that's great. And like on this show, we tell people like, we do have this beef that is grass-fed, grass-finished, but if you can't get that, get yourself something that you can pay for comfortably that doesn't break your bank. But I know that other than like the black stomach of the cows, there's probably a whole lot of other reasons why grass-fed, grass-finished and the way you're raising your beef is superior and healthier. Can you help us break down more of those reasons why, like, it's just higher quality?
Sure. So the omega-3 to omega-6s is the number one. The other piece of it is higher protein density. Grass-fed meat grows a lot slower. So effectively for my beef and any grass-fed operators take it to full finish weight. It's usually about over 2 years. In a conventional operation, it's about 16 months. And that's because the animals go through puberty a lot faster when they're on a corn diet. The same thing that we see with humans, right? Like there's this huge epidemic now of girls go through puberty now in America starting at 7. And 20 years ago, it was 13. So there's been a 5-year shift younger in the onset of puberty in American girls. And that has to do with high calorie diets, nutritionally dense diets. So basically your body is triggered when you have a ton of, and there's a couple different theories why. It's a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I'll just explain it because I think it's kind of relevant, is that when people don't know why it's either some combination of like endocrine chemicals and things in the environment, BPAs, that are triggering it, or it's just nutritional density. So you get this really, really high nutritional density. Another theory on it is that this is the concept of like actual nutritional deprivation also triggers puberty, because when females think that they're going to die, they produce eggs and they become highly fertile. So that's actually how the conventional egg industry works, is called forced molting, where they put the females through starvation cycles and they think they're going to die and they pump out a ton of eggs. And that's a very well-known way to increase fertility and productivity in females of all species. So another kind of theory about why we're having this early onset puberty is that it's so nutritionally bereft, right? Like it's so nutritionally poor that effectively we're fat, but we're starving ourselves. A lot of reasons why, but whatever is happening, we're getting our periods like 5 years earlier than we used to as females in the US. And so there's a similar thing that happens in beef cattle. They go through puberty a couple months. In that case, it's a 2-year life cycle, so it's a lot shorter, but they're going through puberty much, much younger. They're putting on all their secondary sexual characteristics faster, gaining weight faster, all that's happening. So that means that their musculature is building up much more quickly and it's lower quality. And that's something that's hard for me to substantiate with data. Okay, there's plenty of experiences that people have with meat tasting ropey, being, the fibers are kind of rough and thick. Mm-hmm. And one characteristic of my meat that I hear from my customers is that it's very fine and tender. And it's very soluble, so that when you eat it, you never get that like kind of cud of meat on your palate that you're like, gah. You guys have been talking about, especially with chicken, mm-hmm. how you chew it and then there's like this thing that's on your tongue and you're like, what is that? And what, do I spit it out or do I swallow this? And it's like so gross. So that is a characteristic of fast growing protein across species. So that's just kind of that's just kind of an ew factor, gross factor. The nutritional components of that, I don't know, but this is where there's not a lot of research, but I have to say, it's like if these animals are putting on all this weight quickly, the meat's of a lower quality, like a lower taste quality, it's less satiating. That's something that has been documented, that faster growing meat, like with my meats and with a lot of these like heritage animals and slow growing, you eat less of it and you feel more full. Because it hits more of the micronutrient hunger, so a lot of when we're eating for calories, but we're also eating for micronutrients. So foods that are more nutrient dense end up filling you up faster. So if you're looking to be leaner, then that's a great way to kind of not have to make so many sacrifices. So those are kind of a lot of the trade-offs. I think another big thing to notice is flavor. One thing that kind of is interesting to me in the US is that so much, I say this in the US because it's different in Europe, although it's changing everywhere in the world as agriculture consolidates, but and it's also in South America is less of a tradition, but we have this tendency to put lots of sauce on all of our meats. And that sauce typically has a bunch of stuff in it that I'm concerned about eating. Like it's got soy and highly refined seed oils, and it has a lot of sugar in it. And listen, I love a good barbecue as much as anybody, but for an everyday thing, I don't want sugar, soy, and like canola oil on my meat to make it palatable. And I think what we've done is like we've traded off like just natural palatability in meat with really high quality, slow growing protein. We've substituted with this fast growing protein, and then we've had to compensate for the flavor deficit. And so we've become reliant on everything needs a sauce. And that's another thing I think you'll find when you go to a high quality grass-fed provider is that you're like, oh, wow, salt and pepper. I get that comment a lot of my recipes because I cook a bunch and I'd love to cook. And I'm always putting recipes out on Instagram and other platforms. And people are like, oh, this needs more seasoning. I'm like, actually, you just try using better quality protein. You don't have to drench it in like satay sauce if you're using a super high quality protein. So people have that experience a lot in other countries of saying like I went and I ate a lot of food and I didn't gain weight or I felt full sooner. And that's something I've found too, is that's another characteristic of meat. I think I've frozen up.
Oh, right after.
Man, how did you do that before? Looks like you're back now.
I got you now.
Firm Wi-Fi. Sorry about that. It's usually really strong. Am I back?
Yep, you're good now.
Okay, awesome. Where did you lose me at? Sorry.
You said, I think I'm frozen, and then you froze.
Okay, good. So the other piece is that the satiety. So I mentioned that as another one. Then there's also the benefit of like knowing that you're eating meat from an animal that's eating an appropriate diet, right? And is thriving and is healthy, and is not suffering from inflammation and massive like gastrointestinal distress.
Have you personally ever had any like dietary issues, or like what made you kind of, I know that you spent some time cooking and doing that kind of stuff overseas, but was there anything that like led you to investigate nutrition a little bit more?
100%. I mean, I started out as a pure culinarian. I was always athletic, but the nutrition piece of it was less interesting to me. When I lived abroad for 7 years, and in that time I became very carnivorous because I lived in northern Italy primarily. And I went from being a vegan and vegetarian in high school and college, like a lot of women in my kind of age cohort. And I moved to Italy and started just eating meat 2 times a day in northern Italy. And when I came back to the US 7 years later, I kept that diet. And I gained, as soon as I moved back, like within 3 months, I gained like 35 pounds, which for me is a lot. And it was a massive shift where I'm like, I didn't change very much. Like I didn't change how I was eating, but something about the food was different. And now my experience is always difficult with like a sample size of 1, right? Like how am I supposed to generalize from that? But I took it on myself to just like, I love eating meat. I thrive on meat. I'd had a ton of little health issues when I was a vegan and a vegetarian that were just plagued me. And they all went away with a higher meat diet. So I think just for my genetics, it works great for me. I started buying whole animals.
Why were you vegan?
What's that?
Why were you vegan? What made that?
I was environmental reasons. I mean, I remember reading that it was 12 pounds of grain for every pound of beef. And thinking that was irresponsible. And that at the time, it was like the Ethiopian kids that were starving. You remember those images, right?
Yeah.
Of like kids starving around the world and feeling terrible about my choices. I didn't know at the time that cows actually shouldn't even eat grain. Right. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of layers of misinformation in that, right? You know, like you're saying, I'm going to stop eating beef because beef that's fed the wrong thing is bad for the environment or bad for people. That's crazy, right? So that was a real kind of eye opener for me when I moved to Europe, and I started working actually as a cheesemaker initially. And at that time I was eating meat in my college years because I was very athletic. I started to need to eat proteins kind of before the protein powder era. So I started eating meat, and then I moved there and I realized like, oh, a lot of animals do better on pasture and they can be at pasture. So that was a huge change for me. And I ended up just getting my complete worldview changed upside down. You know, like everything I thought about me being bad changed in that time because I saw animals being raised kindly. I saw natural husbandry. I saw natural mothering of animals. So animals being around their young. You know, think about it. The stuff you hear about meat as an American, it's like veal calves in cages and battery hens in cages and all of these different, you know, kind of major, like the way that we hear about animal agriculture, it's all horrifying. You don't want to have anything to do with it, right?
Yeah, you definitely don't want to think about it. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, you know, I really felt that there was that eating meat was irresponsible, and I didn't, you know, I made that choice without even thinking about the health consequences for myself. But, you know, fortunately by living abroad and then changing my diet, I got way healthier, way happier. Like I thrive on a really high fat diet. And I love to cook, and gosh, you know, cooking is a hell of a lot easier when you're using a lot of animal fat. Right. So everything kind of gelled for me. But when I came back and I realized, you know, I had effectively a pretty strong inflammatory response to the meat that I was able to get in America. And I bought my whole first cow back in 2005 and just trying to get myself some better quality meat. Because at the time at the grocery store, I really couldn't buy anything. And from there, I started to learn that it's really hard to like solve it yourself when it comes to buying meat direct. And that's kind of the genesis, many years later to starting Belcampo with my business partner, was just like getting trying to make it a little bit easier for people to get access to really high quality product.
I love that you said you moved to northern Italy and became a carnivore. It made you sound like you were a savage and you're just like eat meat and working, and that's it.
Yeah. I remember the first time my sister came and visited me, and my sister's actually now a vegan. There's a lot of layers to that decision on her part, but and I started to eat a lot of raw meat because in northern Italy, everybody eats tartare almost every dinner. Like you have tartare as a first course. And so she came over and I had raw sausage because there's a very popular, so delicious. It's raw, free range veal sausage with raw pork fat in it. It's bomb. And I had this platter of like raw meat and raw sausage for dinner and like a salad. And she was like, you have gone insane. And I remember she ate cookies for dinner because I had like some cookies in the pantry. And she's like, okay, I'm going to opt out of this. And that's when I realized I'm like, I kind of had gone like seriously off the reservation in my years there. And you know what it was? It's like, it's your body feeling better. When you notch into a program where your body thrives, you're like, hell or high water, I'm not going back. If you're hip to, paying attention to your physiology, and there's been times in my life when I haven't been super into that or haven't chosen to pay attention, but when you're paying attention, like you lock into a program that works for you, you're like, this is what I want, because it's such a game changer in your energy levels and your happiness. Everything comes into line when you've kind of found a really great program for your nutrition. So for me, it was just like, wow, this is so great that so many things are kind of feeling great for me. And I was just like, this is the way that I want to be. And also, I love cheese. I love meat. I love the way it tastes. I love the way it smells when I cook it. There are so many layers that it's so gratifying. So I really wanted to keep that going. And then when I came back and it was like this massive body transformation, and the product that I would buy at the grocery store like smelled really gross. You open the chicken in the bag and it smells like fish, and it's just like, I want to and then the USDA is like overcook everything because it might be contaminated. I get all these things. It's like cook your meat to 165 degrees. And I want to eat this raw. Like I want to feel good eating it raw. Are you kidding me? So that was like a real awakening to me about how different things were where I'd been. And it's not like I don't eat raw meat every day. I do eat raw meat occasionally. I'm happy that I can eat raw meat from Belcampo whenever I want. But it's definitely, it put me on a path, because it's like, it's one thing to do it for the planet. It's another thing when you're doing something that really supports human wellness and human nutrition, that lights a really big fire in me.
You mentioned you were comparing different meat suppliers and the quality of their meat, and you legit just like saw that they were lying about the quality of their meat. So that kind of set off some alarms in my head. How common is that in that industry? Because the fact that you can say it's like this and sell it to people, and then you find out that it's not even close. How often does that happen?
A lot. There's not wins in me in bashing my competitive set, obviously. But so here's the problem. The way that these terms are defined is regulated effectively by industry. So let me just walk you through it. If I'm going to define a term to put on a package, it's usually the biggest player in the room that gets to define it with the USDA. So in the case of natural, the definition of natural is effectively really the groundwork is laid by Tyson Foods. So you'll notice that the word natural is all over Tyson's stuff. And Tyson is like the worst offender in terms of terrible quality poultry. It's inhumane. It's raised to grow weight at like 5 to 6 times the natural speed. Okay, so it puts on weight 6 times as fast as natural. So it's the opposite of natural. But that term was defined by them, and obviously they've got a lot of clout, right? And so unfortunately, many of these terms become co-opted in a way that's kind of unique to the meat industry, the level of co-option that happens because of how consolidated the meat industry is. The meat industry is the most consolidated of the food industries. So, and that's because of all the complexity and the capital expense, like slaughterhouses, massive amounts of land needed. It's a very capital intensive. And, that's like one of the reasons that our business has actually worked is that we had a long-term financial partner that helped it like get through the early years and grow, right? But most small scale ranches don't have that. So it's a very capital intensive industry. There's a couple big players that control everything. And those guys work very closely with the USDA, and they define the terms and the regulation of the terms. So I choose, for example, to not use the word natural on any of my products because I don't want a word on a Belcampo product that's the same as a word on, big industry, non-natural product. So the words that you can pay attention to are words that are regulated with certifications. So if I can line it out for you, if I'm buying poultry, and I want a really high quality product, the number one thing I'm looking for is the word pasture, which is a regulated term that it's such a kind of extreme term and hasn't been co-opted by industry because it can't be. And that means that the animals live most of their life outdoors. So I'm looking for number one, pasture. Number two is organic. And if there's a bird that's organic and one that's pastured, I'm buying the pastured one because that's actually more meaningful in terms of the quality of the product and the healthiness of it. Pastured, again, organic. The third thing I'm looking for, which is a nice but not necessary because it's kind of implicit in the other two, is if it's certified humane or Animal Welfare Association approved. So those three, pastured, organic, and certified, some type of humane certification, that's for poultry. And if you get one of the three, please let it be pastured. In beef, I'm looking for grass-fed and finished. And the reason that I want it to say grass-fed and finished or 100% grass-fed, that is regulated, and that will ensure that the animal has its entire life on grass. The problem is that in the US, all beef spend a big chunk of their lives on grass because they're with their moms. They're nursing, and then where they're out in, it's like small scale holders of what's called cow-calf operations. There's thousands and thousands of them across the US. They could have anywhere from 25 to like 3,000 mother cows produce calves. They nurse them. They sell them at 6 months. So in that time, they're technically on grass. So an animal can be completely feedlot raised and still say grass-fed on the pasture on the package. So I want to see grass-fed and finished, and I want to see organic certified again. And number two, and number three would be certified humane. Now, why I'm putting organic as second is that organic's really meaningful. It's not easy to get, but it doesn't mean everything. And that's a problem because many consumers think it means everything, but it doesn't touch on the actual what's in the diet in many cases, and it doesn't touch on some aspects of how the animals are held. So in the case of, say, like an organic milk, organic beef, it can be feedlot but fed organic corn. So that's still maladaptive. It's still not great for the animal, but it's organic. So there's workarounds for organic that are concerning for me. So I that's why it's usually number two for me, although it's pretty consistently on all of our Belcampo products. For pork, it's similar to chicken. It's pastured as number one, organic's number two, and humane is number three. And then lamb is similar to beef. So ruminants and omnivores are kind of the same, two similar categories. In the ruminants, I want the grass-fed and finished. I want the organic and certified humane. In the omnivores or monogastrics, pigs and chickens, I want that pastured. I want that organic number two and some type of humane certification for number three. Words that mean nothing, okay? Words that mean nothing. Natural, okay? Means absolutely nothing. Sadly, cage-free doesn't mean much. Sadly, free range doesn't mean much. And that kind of breaks my heart because I think free range could have been a great certification, but free range really means that the animals have access to pasture, but they're not actually pastured. Wow. So they can, it's like saying, are you in great shape if you have a gym membership, or are you in great shape if you go to the gym every day, right? So the pastured animals are actually live outdoors all the time, whereas the free range have access to the outdoors through a small door that's somewhere in their giant indoor hoop house. So unfortunately, those words don't mean as much. Now, do they mean something? Yeah. If you're in a food desert or a place where you don't have many other options and there's that option, it's probably better. But sadly, there's not much meaning and much teeth to those words anymore.
Were you kind of like almost mad or frustrated when you switched from being vegan to wanting to eat more meat and then starting to understand that meat could be farmed in an ethical fashion and in a fashion that can actually not only not hurt the planet, but it seems like regenerative agriculture can be a plus for the environment. Where you kind of like, why the fuck did I know about this? This is like, why is this hidden? You know?
Yeah, like also just some of the health stuff too. I think especially for women, it's like, you want to take care of your fertility, you better eat meat. You know, like you want to take care of like beauty and stuff, like collagen, et cetera, you better eat meat. Like I think especially for women, there's this like mentality that's really naive about diet, which is that you can kind of choose your own adventure and like everything's valid and everything works.
Everything in moderation.
Like, what's that?
I said everything in moderation.
Exactly. And it's like, actually, no, I mean, I don't believe that. Yeah. So that was sort of, I more get frustrated at young women now who are in that journey and are like, oh, I don't eat this or I don't eat that. And it's like, I'm just a big fan of kind of like eating what my grandma ate or my great grandma ate now. Right. But it took me a while to get there. You know, keep in mind, I was a child of the 90s or, you know, like adolescence in that time. And it was all snack wells. And, you know, these like horrible fat-free things and nobody's saying, oh, you should eat protein or get fat. It'll help your mood. You know, I also think too, like women in the US have just stratospheric and unprecedented levels of anxiety, right? And for me, the most calming thing and what helps me, I think, stay grounded a lot of times is like a high fat, high protein diet. It keeps you calm. It keeps you satiated. Like I'm anxious when I'm hungry. You know, I feel like we're not feeding ourselves holistically. We're not nourishing ourselves. You know, there's not a deep nutrition. We're eating this food that's high in calories, nutritionally bereft. And that's why we all need supplements now too. You know, why didn't our grandparents need supplements? Because the food was far, far richer. In 1950, a chicken that came to market had been alive for 54 weeks. And now a chicken that's sold at a grocery store, a Tyson chicken, 2.5 weeks.
Jesus. Wow.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
So that chicken that lived for 54 weeks, that was far more nutritionally dense than what we get today. And it also had tons of micronutrients that we don't even know what they are or how to track them, you know? So I feel like we've kind of, so I do get angry about just broadly now, I'd say I'm more irate that things like my coaches and stuff back then were like, oh, you know, because I always had things like canker sores and dry skin and really a lot of split ends and all that's gone away since the way that I eat now has been gone for 20 years. But it was like all these little plaguing issues. And it's so, and I see, you know, so many women now struggling with like complex and expensive supplement routines and also, you know, this is where I'm going to sound like a crazy person, but I use exclusively just like animal fat for my skincare as well. Used to it. And I have a skincare line that's lard and tallow and beef fat based. It's like the most natural. I don't want to put anything on my skin that's petroleum based. Like that's just like a no brainer, right? I'm not going to put a petroleum based stuff or anything with BPAs on my like large porous organ that surrounds my body, right? My skin. So, but I think that people are so misguided now and they've really chosen to trust kind of big industry with a lot of really key decisions about their lives. And they haven't really questioned what are the motives or thinking, you know, behind those organizations and how they structure things, right? So it's like we sort of outsource all of our feeding and care and all these major like food fabrication and, you know, all of our pizzas are now prepared, all of our lasagna is now frozen, and all the companies that are doing all that lasagna making and pizza making for us, we're like, that's cool, they totally got us, like they're watching out for us. And they're not, you know? They're not. And we've outsourced this big part of our lives to them with no question that they're taking care of us, and they're not. And we're showing the results in our society with our struggle with weight, our struggle with like mood disorders, anxiety, and depression. Like these are all diet related. And I think we've kind of like just given this away and without really thinking about the consequences.
Have you noticed rubbing your body in animal fat has resulted in like a perfume? Has somebody been like, oh my God, what is that?
God will love you, your man a little less so. Yeah, no, I actually put oils in it, and my dog does like go bananas. But yeah, I actually, you know, for a while I just was using it with coconut oil. Like you can do half and half coconut oil and suet. And
like, oh my God, you smell like bacon.
Yeah, no, I would never use a smoked fat. I just use a clean, natural base fat. So it actually is pretty odorless.
Okay.
And then you could put essential oils in it, or you can mix it with something like a rosehip oil if you want it softer and have a better scent to it. But these are animals that we share a lot of our DNA with, unlike plants that produce like seed plants, right? We don't share much of our DNA with like rice bran oil. So one thing that's like, you actually have a huge absorption. So it's a really awesome technique. I mean, I think for guys too, it's also really cheap. You can make, a quart of suet for like $6, and so many people are spending $80 on like skincare creams and this and that and stuff. And it's just a fantastic product. But just in general, like where you can find a simpler version that works in your lifestyle, you should opt for it. And in general, like I actually got into using the animal fat because I was reading about how, these in the 20s and 30s, we were always long on fat. So I was trying to find ways to do things with it. And I usually start with myself. And I was pregnant with my second child at the time. And I had been reading about BPAs in all the cosmetics. And so I started using coconut oil mixed with lard. And now I've transitioned to suet, which is beef fat, because the absorption is just amazing. It works really great for my skin. But it's inexpensive. It's totally natural. It works, does everything it's supposed to do. It's like, why wouldn't you do it? So I started out just trying to think, can I sell some more fat to some of these crazy people that use it as moisturizer? And now I'm like one of the crazy people, right? Because it worked really great for me. But yeah, I also think just, there's a number of different products that we used to make. You used to make toothpaste out of animal fat too, right? So there's lots of different things that we used to do. Soap was all naturally based on tallow and lard. Just until 50 or so years ago. There are many ways that we use this like precious, because these animals used to be very expensive to produce. So we were watching every single last thing, right? And so we were very conscious about the whole animal utilization. Not like, I'm going to be badass and eat head cheese kind of whole animal thing. But like we were just taking every piece and making it into soap, making it into cream, making it into, shampoo, all those different things we made out of animals. And that was actually more respectful because we used the whole thing, right? And then it kind of gets us out of this troubling issue that we have now where so many of our cosmetics and things we put on the surface of our body are so chemically based.
I want to know, because you mentioned chickens earlier. Do you plan on, or do you do chicken at all? Because like when you mentioned the chickens are now being put into 2 weeks on a market versus 54 weeks in the past. I really never paid attention much to chicken because I don't really buy much chicken anymore. Right. So when you think about that, do you like, are there any companies that do that well, or do you plan on going into chickens at all? Yeah.
I apologize. And actually, you guys blacked out, so I'm not even sure which one of you is talking. This is Nsima.
Oh.
I can't say you respond to you, but I'm not sure which is the question. I don't know your voice as well enough. But so we do produce chicken. I produce 7 species here: beef, pork, lamb, chicken, duck, and turkey. And the chickens that we produce, it's one of the products that people are kind of most cultish about for our brand, because it takes about 10 weeks to come to finish instead of 2.5. So we don't do 50 weeks like they did in the 1950s, but it's about 10 weeks. And so our chickens now, we retail them, it's like $25 for a whole chicken. So it's an expensive chicken. And it's actually the product that I have the worst profitability on. So that's like too much information, but the world of my problems, like it's very hard for me to charge enough, to make that chicken worth it. But you can find chickens like and I'll send you guys all my chickens and my steaks and ground beef and everything. You're going to get big, huge care packages. And hopefully, you can get product from us, because it's a very different experience in eating it. You take it out of the bag. It doesn't have that fishy smell, and it looks really athletic. That's actually one of the most viral posts I ever did on Instagram, was my chicken next to a Trader Joe's organic chicken. And then I put the post of like, which chicken do you want to look like? Because my chicken is like hella athletic. It's red. It's very muscular. It actually has small breasts and big thighs, but it looks like a dog chicken. And that was like got huge virality, because I think a lot of people don't put it together. It's like, you are what you eat. Do you want to be the flabby, puffy, pale one, or do you want to be like the buff, tan one? So our chickens are a totally different breed. But there's a reason why people don't do it, in that it's hard to get consumers to pay the price. Now Americans, 60% of the protein that we eat in America is chicken. And that's a really different mix. I think it was in the 1930s, it was like 15%. And we used to eat a lot more beef and a lot more pork. And pork has gone out of fashion and chicken has risen because people perceive it as being healthy. But it's actually the worst offender in terms of consolidation and quality. So, and it's also really sadly something like 50% of chicken produced in America is contaminated with fecal matter. There's actually a recent lawsuit from the Physicians Association of the United States suing the poultry industry because of this consistent contamination. And the reason why is that chickens are very small and their intestines and their whole digestive system is very fragile. So when you kill it and eviscerate it, there's a really high risk of contamination, right? It's just kind of like math, because if you think about it with a beef, like when you kill it and take the guts out, it still has the skin when you take the guts out, right? So when you're removing the stomach and the viscera, there's very limited contact, because if a little piece of poop splatters out of the guts, it's going to hit the internal rib cage, so bone, or it's going to hit the hide, and all that's coming off the animal. So your contamination is pretty much about post-harvest. So that's like a guy like sneezing on the meat, or somebody who's got dirty hands, or like water that's contaminated. That's how beef gets contaminated. Chicken's a different story. Chicken's very small. These tender little entrails, they're being eviscerated. There's feathers, right? And it's like, it's got thin skin. It breaks easily. So there's a lot of contamination of raw flesh with the fecal matter just because of the nature of the bird. Now, that's avoidable if you go very slow, right? And are very careful. In those big industry lines, this is all automated. These are all killed basically by machines, right? And it moves very, very quickly. So the way that we manage that is interesting. And it's a way we manage a lot of things in America, which is we produce this literally kind of like a shitty chicken because it's got poop on it, and we dunk it in chlorinated water bath. And that is a chiller, right? It's for chilling. So that takes the body temperature down to a safe territory where the contamination is limited so that the microbes can't populate. But when you dunk it in that water, you're ostensibly doing it to lower the body temperature. But that water now has chlorine, so bleach, and lactic acid in it. And what that water does is kills a lot of the superficial bacteria, although despite that, we still have 50% contamination. It gives you a sense of the magnitude of the issue. And it also adds 15% body weight to the chicken. Chickens are sold by weight. You see how puffy chickens are when you buy them now at the grocery store. And think about in your body, like if you get hit and you get a bruise, what happens, right? You get this swelling. So when you have any physical trauma to musculature, the way it heals itself is it absorbs liquid. That's the natural response of our bodies when we've had any traumatic injury or hit. We heal by absorbing liquid. So there's this puffiness, that's the bump on the bruise. But when you have an animal that's just been killed, all the musculature is going through that chemical process of absorbing liquid. So it will, as it's going to rigor mortis, absorb a lot of liquid. So that adds body weight. Unfortunately, that water that it's in is like chlorinated water. So if you've had the experience of cooking a chicken breast or a piece of chicken and you see a white liquid come out of it, you've had that experience?
Yeah.
Or you're cooking, like you got like ground chicken and you're cooking and there's like this white, it's like water is coming out of it. That's that chlorinated water bath coming out of the chicken.
Oh man.
Wow.
Shit.
So that's a really disgusting thing to think about, because what are you doing to your microbiome? You're eating chlorine, right? Ugh. Like, what are you doing? I mean, just think about the actual consequences for your body, like of having you're having a chicken that's 15% of its weight is an antimicrobial liquid. Like, it's horrifying, right? But that is just, and the reason that we get away with that, it's not labeled like a cleaning thing, right? It really is a cleaning thing. It's like, oh no, this is what we need to do to get the animals to quickly come to temp to limit microbial contamination. But what they're really doing is washing it in bleach and increasing the body weight.
Yeah.
So that's sort of the short story of why chicken is really horrifying in the US. The one kind of crazy thing too about chicken. So we've gone from 50 plus weeks to about 2 weeks in the past 70 years. And operations like mine that do things the old fashioned way, but more efficiently, do it in about 10 weeks. And in the 1930s, chicken on a per pound basis was more expensive than filet mignon.
Wow.
Okay. So chicken has had the most radical transformation in price per pound, which is why it's become the most popular meat. It's very, very cheap.
Yeah.
So anytime I hope you can coach yourself too. It's like when you go to the grocery store and you're like, wow, $2.99 a pound. You got to be like, wow, how the heck did they do that? Right? How are they able to make it so cheap? So anytime you see meat that's surprisingly cheap, that should really be a trigger for a bunch of questions. Like, how on earth can that happen? What efficiencies have been brought into this? So let's just talk about what that means on an economic basis for chicken. That process where we went from a dude standing there like we have at our plant who, uses an electric sun knife, cuts the head of the chicken off, then takes it out and has gloves on and moves all the viscera carefully and then scalds it, removes all the feathers, everything. That whole process has turned into a single machine that boom, boom, and that happens in like maybe 8 seconds. So that is a massive cost savings because that guy standing there in Northern California with all the benefits and the labor laws and that's a very expensive role, right, for me to fill. But then, so the cost of moving from that to the machine that does it in 8 seconds, that's a huge cost savings. That's a huge reason why my chicken's $25 down to the, whatever, $5.99 for a whole chicken that you might see at the grocery store. Then the other, factors are the feed is this, the way that it's raised is raised in a way that rapidly increases its weight very quickly. It's raised in the dark. It's raised debeaked. So the beaks are actually cut off the birds because they're under so much stress that they peck each other to death if they leave their beaks on.
Wow.
So they're fed a slurry that they can eat with just their tongue. And the reason they're pecking each other to death is that they have so much stress. So their cortisol levels are very high, which increases their weight gain, right? Just like with humans, you have a lot of stress, you gain weight more easily. So these are all these factors. So it's like when you say, wow, that's so cheap, you need to really think about that and be like, what were the trade-offs that happened to make that so cheap? And what are the health implications of those trade-offs? Okay, so some of those might just be ick factors. The chicken being debeaked, does that have a health implication for you? No. But what else does it tell you about it? Well, these animals are raised in a massive cortisol environment. It's super, super stressful. What's happening to their hormonal balance and their endocrine balance that ends up in this meat that we don't know about? I might think about that, right? And then another thing too, it's like this animal is raised in a way and processed in a way that is so dirty that it has to be dunked in bleach. And I'm eating, like 1/10 to 15% of what I'm eating is actually bleach water. That's a huge health impact, right? That's bad for your stomach. That's why I think a lot of people, you look at the number of people that eat Tums after every meal in America, it's stratospheric. A lot of people medicate after every meal because they feel queasy. Well, why do they feel queasy? Maybe it's because they had a teaspoon of bleach with their chicken, right? So there's some things too. It's like, look at that cheap price and think about the trade-offs that led to that cheap price. That's the question you got to be having in the grocery aisle, right? That's the conversation you should be having with yourself.
Yeah, Anya, you're revealing a lot of dirty little secrets that I'm sure some of the big names probably really hate that you're sharing all this with us. But have you actually received any blowback from any of those companies as far as it all goes back to, I don't know if you've seen the documentary Super Size Me 2. He made a second one.
Oh, wow.
Okay. I gotta check that out.
Yeah, because a lot of the stuff that he reveals in that documentary, it's, a lot of the stuff that you're saying about like some of the labels on the packaging doesn't mean a damn thing. But in that documentary, he did show that some of the bigger companies like Tyson actually have like a stronghold on the entire industry, and they can kind of make somebody sink or swim. And so I was just curious if you've experienced anything like that, just because you are a big name in the regenerative agriculture, even though you said you were kind of small, but because you are so big, I'm wondering if maybe you kind of have a target on your back now.
I'm interested. I think that's going to be a sign of success for me when that happens.
Nice.
I'm going to bring it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I've been invited to, be on some panels and stuff with like people from some of the larger industries. I won't say which companies, but they've been extremely tense. Like I got the sense they know exactly who I am and what I say. And so that's been interesting for me. And like, it kind of makes me wonder how comfortable I am about the next step for my company, because it's obviously about, I'm not here to take things down at all. I'm not like a challenger in that I want to see the system explode. Like if I worked for PETA or did something like that, like where I'm like, this all has to go away. That's actually not my goal. My goal is to build like an amazing alternative that people can feel really good about and that they can buy kind of everywhere that they need to. It's not impossible to get. That's success for me. I want to build something that is incredibly high integrity, is a better option for people, answers all the questions, and then it's pretty easy to get. So success for that is automatically going to be a big challenge for them, right? Because right now I'm doing my first deal with a big retailer. And when that gets popping, then I think things are going to get heavier for me. But I'm ready for it. I also think we're sort of carving out because I have my own supply chain. We have 30,000 acres of farmland, 7 species raised commercially, have our own slaughterhouse. We do now, a lot of our business right now is through e-commerce. So I'm selling directly all around the US. So I don't really have to work too much with big ag. And the nice thing too is that, another piece to acknowledge is that there's thousands of small farms across the US. And I encourage everybody who's listening to make an effort to buy from them as well. Like there's lots of regenerative small farms. The chickens that I was talking about raising 10 weeks, like there's hundreds of farms across the US that sell at farmers markets that do exactly that. Right. So we're not the only people, but we're a bigger player. So the thing that's been, so I'd say the answer to the industry question is I've had nothing extremely overt against me. I've definitely felt tension in my conversations with people because my premise really challenges their claims. The most aggressive outreach that I've had is really with PETA and with animal rights organizations who have really tracked and intimidated me in the past. And actual physical intimidation. I had an experience. I was 9 months pregnant. I'd given a talk at Cal, and I was surrounded by people, and they drew me aside, and it was a terrifying experience. So I've actually been more targeted by the animal rights activists, and I think my message is really challenging because I am an ex-vegan. I did the thing for all the right reasons. I am a crazy animal lover, like obsessed with animals, and so I'm actually on. I think I'm on their team. But I think that my message helps people who share the values of loving animals and wanting to do the right thing by animals still eat meat. So I think I'm more of a challenge to them, right? Than not a bigger than like a Tyson, obviously. But I think my message is capturing a lot of people and sort of answering their questions about meat. So there's definitely been a little bit more intimidation from them than by any kind of big ag.
What has led to you having these strong beliefs in yourself to be able to do some of this stuff, to be able to go over to Europe when you're young and to learn how to cook, and then to now take on this huge business, of farming? Like, was it a parent, a mentor, a friend?
Mentor. Yeah, I think I've always been motivated by doing things that felt impossible or that people thought were impossible. I've also always been really just kind of interested in things and quirky. Like I was really passionate about cheese for a hot minute in college, which is why I went and became a cheesemaker, which then led to all my journeys down the road and led to me becoming a chef and culinarian and all those different pieces. So I think it's like, I definitely, in retrospect, I moved to Europe when I was 21. I had a carry-on bag. I had a $10,000 scholarship. I had a folding bicycle. And I came back 7 years later, and like all my money was in traveler's checks. Like it was nuts. I didn't have a cell phone. It was like so risky as a young woman to just be like, I'm going out to these really rural areas and learn how to make cheese. So I think I have a healthy dose of being insane as well. Like a lot of like overconfidence in myself, and like, God bless that nothing really bad happened to me. And I did really learn how to make cheese, and I really learned how to cook, and I really learned how to live. And I think I was pretty disinterested in like a near-term financial gain, which has been helpful. I think a lot of people right out of college too, and just right out of high school, whatever your point of liftoff in life is that you're defining success in a near-term thinking. And for me, it's like I wanted to do something transformative and big. And then the everyday fire is the integrity, like being able to get up and do things with integrity. And have something I can really stand behind. It would be really hard for me to be in a position where I didn't have like a sense of believing in my product and being, just like eating it every day, loving the way, I interact with our product all the time. And like, it's like I'm constantly in it and enjoying it and making it better. And that kind of piece of it, of like really feeling gratified. I'm also just like insanely domestic and love to cook and love to grill. And so like the gratification for me of just producing like the dopest, best thing to grill is huge. Like the gratification for me of like, at the end of the day, I just love the stews that I can make and the braises, and I love what I can grill. Like I'm just very proud of those things. So that's another kind of piece of it. But I think, I get this question now too from like a lot of young women about, I'm 45. I've been in animal ag pretty much for 2 decades now. And it was definitely not a cool thing to do. Now it's cool to be into food, but when I was 20, it was really not cool. Unless you're going to be like a fancy chef or something. But it's like, it was just about sort of sticking to what felt right and being kind of courageous in the everyday, you know, like taking the risks and doing the thing that felt good and not the thing that necessarily looked the coolest. Right. That's something that I've been consistent in my life. That served me well, you know, because now I've ended up producing something that its time is, I think, coming, right? Just by kind of sticking to my guns and doing something I believed in for many years before it became popular.
That's awesome.
What do you do for fitness?
I love the Bulgarian bag. That's my favorite jam because I travel a lot I go up to the farm a bunch. I got a house up here and my kids come with me. It's a great experience. So the Bulgarian bag, the swing thing, I love.
Right. Yeah.
So I do that. I do kettlebells. I box. I've been boxing for 15 years. So I have a heavy bag at home and I work out with a trainer when I can. So those are the major things. I rode competitively in college and love erg and doing all that kind of stuff as well, rowing machine. But I really like things that I have I could never be like what you guys do with the intensity of the training regimes and like the commitment to writing it all down. And like, I mean, the people that I know that have come anywhere, I mean, you guys are like pinnacle in your field, obviously, but it's like, it's so impressive, like the dedication and the attention to detail around fitness. For me, it's like fitness is, it's not even about looking good. It's about just my emotionality and being really happy. And like just wanting to be stimulated. So I like being able to get up and like do some kettlebells, do some Bulgarian bags. And then in the afternoon, do another couple things. Like I'll do squats and bench or something. Like, so I usually try to do like 15, 20 minutes in the morning, 15, 20 minutes in the afternoon, which has been something fabulous about COVID, you know, just being able to be home more and kind of, I have a great little home setup. But actually at my home, I've done something where I put stuff kind of all around. So I've got like some dumbbells outside. I've got a yoga swing outside so I can go upside down. I have the soupless bands. I got my Bulgarian bag in my kitchen. I have a medicine ball out in front of my house. So it's like I can kind of do a circuit in my home as well and not get bored. Because the key thing for me is like just keep it interesting and keep it fun.
Real quick question. As far as regenerative agriculture is concerned, initially when we started this conversation, you said that you went into it looking at it 30 years from now, right? I'm assuming you have one pasture right now where you are, correct? Okay. Yeah. So let's say 30 more years from now, when do you plan on having pastures in different areas? And then also when you do set up a new pasture, is that another long game for that new pasture or can you set things up quicker?
Okay, that's a great question. So the answer actually where I am now is our home ranch. This is 7,000 acres. We have 4 ranches, each of which are like between 7 and 12,000 acres. And this, when I started the business, I did baseline carbon analysis here, and it was very carbon impoverished because it had been farmed conventionally. I did the first sampling against that 6 years later. This was last year. And we showed improvements in carbon sequestration in all the pastures. But that was after 6 years. It's very slow and it was tiny, you know, but the scientists were like, that's great, you did great. It's improved a bunch, right? So the thing is that all this is really long-term. You can't fast track carbon sequestration. You can't like triple it or quadruple it. It happens at the rate that it happens naturally. So the latter part of your question is like, I can't really light a fire under it. It sort of is what it is. And the piece that I need to do is just be consistent and show up every year with the same high integrity approach to management. And that's what gets you to carbon sequestration. It's consistency and it's long term. Because the kind of everyday stuff that we're doing is no-till drilling. So just going over and just adding additional seeds to increase the forage density. We're doing, you know, like hedgerows and like diversity. You're doing a lot of kind of like soft management. And then it's really about how you use the animals. So we're moving the animals around the pastures in kind of dense pods, which mimic how ruminants evolved on the prairies in great migratory herds. So those are the practices of regenerative agriculture. It's not like any of this is revolutionary or, you know, what's revolutionary is just doing it every day for years at a bigger scale, right? Yeah. And then how we scale it, this year I launched my partner farm program. I have one partner now for poultry, and I've got a few in the hopper that we're starting out for our beef program. And what we're doing is actually implementing our regenerative practices with our partners over now. I mean, once we get this program up and running, it could be in the millions of acres. I mean, that's my dream. I don't really want to keep on, and it's really capital intensive, so can't really raise the money for it either at some point. But like buying endless amounts of land and having more and more complex management structures is like not amazing. You know, it just kind of makes it into a big business. What I dream of doing with Belcampo is making it a marketing company for farms that we either are already regenerative and need access to markets, or that want to become regenerative and need help on the actual production side and scale and marketing. So that's where I'd like to go, and that's what I'm beginning to do right now, is to launch this partner program.
What are some of the misconceptions in terms of somebody being like vegan or vegetarian and being against you having that much land? What do you think on something like that? Because it does take a large amount of land for something like soybeans and some of the other things that a vegan or vegetarian would eat, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a little bit out of my expertise. But broadly, the idea that veganism is better for the environment is false. Because unless you are doing it in a very, very specific way. Okay. So I'll unpack that, which is that if you are relying on like Beyond Meats and quinoa salad and microgreens and, you know, smoothies with papayas in them for your diet as like a Los Angeles vegan, that's actually terrible carbon footprint. All these products are brought in from far away. They're all very costly. They're all, you know, really resource intensive. In the case of things that are based off of large scale soy and grain production, they're terrible for the environment and terrible for carbon. So there's really a lot of misinformation there around that. If you were to say, if you're going to be a vegan and want to be great for the environment, it's like, get ready to eat sauerkraut all winter long. And, you know, it's like there's a way to do it, but it's not what vegans now, I mean, you see it, it's like all tropical fruits, like all asparagus and, you know, in December and zucchini, like we're just accustomed to veganism is seen as like a little bit independent of seasonality, which to make it actually environmentally better, you need to be paying attention to seasonality. So I really call into question that any of those claims. But the problem that I face is that veganism's claims about conventional meat are 1,000% right. They're totally right? Carbon is terrible in conventional beef. Corn-fed beef is raised in a way where you're using lots of petroleum-based inputs, you're doing lots of tilling, you're doing lots of transportation. It's bad for the environment. So they're absolutely right. Will I say that like Impossible Meats graphs and statistics about things is 100% right? No. I mean, there's obviously manipulation and ad dollars behind making certain cases and things. I'm not going to say, I'm going to quote that one exactly. But broadly, the case that they're making is correct. I mean, think about it. It's like there's a style of beef production where you're growing a human grade food, corn. You're growing that chemically with lots of Roundup or glyphosate, lots of fertilizers. You're using tractors to plant it, tractors to harvest it. You're then storing it in silos and then trucking it to cows. Okay, that system compared to a system like mine, where I've got these green fields right outside the window and the cows walk out there, right? So obviously it's a totally different system. But the way that we've, unfortunately, the beef has just become conflated. So it's the analogy I can think of is like you're saying, okay, I'm gonna go 100 miles. I'm gonna go in a Hummer, and I'm gonna say that going in a Hummer 100 miles is the same impact, or in a helicopter 100 miles, the same impact as walking, because it doesn't matter, because what I'm talking about is the carbon footprint from me getting 100 miles from here. Okay, it doesn't matter how I get there, if I walk or if I take a helicopter, it's the same carbon footprint. So that's like the argument that those guys are making, is that it doesn't really matter how it's made. It's beef has its carbon footprint. So I struggle with that. And that's just real misinformation. And it's misinformation with the target, like it's with the goal of getting people to give up meat. And the China challenge I'd put out there is, a lot of this, the push in veganism right now is about people eating powders and bars and like fabricated meats, like Beyond Meats and the Petri dish type of products. It's all highly processed. The origins are very, very obscure. We don't know where any of the stuff comes from. It's all typically genetically modified. And so like that actually really plays into the agro-industrial model, right? That's what they want, is that things don't have any identity conservation. They're anonymous. They can be produced at scale. There's no differentiation. So it's like the veganism argument is actually kind of a big ag argument. So I just challenge that. There's a lot of reliance on ingredients that are genetically modified, that are highly processed, and that's the choice that you're being asked to make as a vegan, right? And it's because they're trying to say like there's no trade-off in the food is just as convenient. And in reality, to be a really conscious vegan, you should be probably like fermenting a lot of vegetables and eating a lot of raw vegetables, not relying on highly processed, seed-based foods.
Tell us about cheese.
What's that?
Tell us about cheese. We love cheese.
Brie cheese.
I love cheese. What's your favorite cheese?
Brie.
I like all kinds of different cheese, but what are some cheeses that people maybe aren't aware of? Like, what are some cheeses that you would recommend that people just like, they don't have any clue that they can get it, and it's maybe at most grocery stores or something like that?
Well, I would say one thing for people that are looking for like an energy bar kind of equivalent or like a protein packed snack is to look at Parmesan, right? Because if you look at the macros on Parmesan, it's not that different from a protein bar, right? It's like high protein. It's really digestible, especially like the Italian Parmesan. It's all made from free range animals, and it's such a superfood. It's really delicious. So just like with meat, I'm always cautious about cheese that has a really long shelf life. Or is highly processed, or it's anything other than just milk and rennet in it. So that's my first piece of advice, is just make sure there's no other stabilizers or things in it. I also tend to, just for toxicity and safety reasons, stay away from smoked cheeses, even though I love the taste of like smoked Gouda, but anything that's got a smoke ring on it, that's just a chemical and it's not great for your gut. It's antimicrobial. It's not good. So I'd stay away from those. Cheeses that I love, I'd say from a health perspective, I find that sheep milk cheeses are super digestible. Sheep and goat are both like very digestible, really delicious. And it's really easy to find like more natural alternatives for them in mainstream grocery. So those are my favorite cheeses are probably like hard sheep milk cheeses, Parmesan. I too love Brie, although I also love soft sheep and goat cheeses with a crust on them, like a goat camembert or something that's epic and delicious. I think it's the most underrated dinner is just like a big old piece of cheese and like some red peppers, but like an obscene amount of cheese. Like I just know it's like if you feel like you would limit yourself as the first course, but if it's actually like dinner, then it's like you can really go to town. How
do they make some of those cheeses that have little crunchy things in them? How do they make those? Are those like cooked extra or something like that? Or
no, that's actually just that's a really good indicator of quality. So what that crunch is actually a tyrosine.
I've never had it.
What's that? Yeah, so
it'll change your life. It'll change your life.
But it's like an amino acid. So in a long aged cheese, what's happening is lots of stuff is breaking down. So when you're eating a brie, the reason that the middle is soft is there's been a lipidase reaction where the lipids have actually softened in the proteolase. There's been like a protein breakdown. So everything's kind of like all their boundaries are gone and they're all smushy in together. Okay. And you add specific microbes to the cheese to make that happen. And then, so what's happening inside a cheese as it ages is that there's just a natural breakdown. And in Parmesan and in other super aged cheeses like Gouda, you'll have that similar breakdown and the cell walls will be gone and the proteins are starting to degrade. And one of the components of the proteins is an amino acid called tyrosine. And those tyrosine molecules will like seek each other out slowly in the matrix of the cheese and glom together. And so when you have that crunch, you should be thrilled because it means that your cheese has been aged naturally. Okay, so that means in the open air, because if you wrap them in plastic, the degradation doesn't really happen. Okay, so it doesn't really you can't get a brie to get soft if it's wrapped in plastic. It has to be in interaction with the air. Okay, so because there's a natural microbial thing, but there's also just an interaction with the air. The air then feeds the bacteria inside the cheese that need oxygen to be able to do their work and break down the inside of the cheese. So the naturally aged cheeses are going to have a lot more kind of going on inside of them. so that the proteins have been broken down. Their individual amino acids are floating around, and this tyrosine stick together, and they form what's called a tyrosine crystal. And that tastes crunchy. People often think that it's salt, right? It's kind of crunchy and hard. And what it is actually just a bunch of these little amino acids are like sticking together for whatever reason. And it means that the cheeses, and if you get, really old, like I've had 5-year-old Goudas that have tyrosine crystals that are like, like half a centimeter across, are huge. So the longer the cheese ages, the bigger these crystals get. And if you have a very, like a cheese that's maybe a year and a half, you'll sometimes see just like flecks of white across it. And that's the beginning of those crystals forming. Amazing. That's kind of cool, right? Imagine like those little, by the cheese, all these little pieces of amino acids are finding each other and like hanging out together and forming.
What's the deal with whey protein? Isn't whey protein is like a waste that you guys would get rid of when you make cheese, right? Because it's like not palatable.
In America now, that whole milk is like less expensive than like in the olden days. The reason why cheddar is orange is that it was actually a way of, people have been adulterating food for centuries. So in the old days, milk was sold on butter fat. And the yellower the butter fat, that was the healthier the animal, because butter fat gets yellow if animals eat green grass.
God, that sounds good. I said, God, that sounds good. Butter fat.
I know, yeah. So there's like, so you used to be wanting your milk to be yellower, and now people are grossed out by yellow milk, and they're grossed out by yellowish beef fat. But all that is keratin. It's a good sign. It means that the animals, it's the genetics, because some cows can eat all grass and don't have yellow fat. And then other cows like Jerseys, they get yellowish fat. Typically dairy animals get yellowish fat, or animals with some dairy genetics. So don't think that if your beef fat is white, it hasn't been on grass. Only some of the animals have the gene that turns their fat yellow with the keratin. But in the olden days, they would add a little bit of annatto, which is a natural old-fashioned yellow dye, to milk and to cheese to make it look like it'd been on grass.
Wow.
And so that's why you have that yellowish, that's why people still to this day add yellow color to cheddar. Now I totally forgot your initial question, man. What we were talking about.
I don't remember.
It was whey protein.
Whey protein, yeah.
Oh yeah, so we were talking about how that's just so funny to me that now we're paying extra for milk with the fat removed, right? So whey protein is interesting. Milk is subsidized in the US, right? So it's considered an essential like food autonomy thing. And so whey protein is widely available because a lot of milk that's produced in the US is in excess. We produce far more milk than we need. So we convert it into whey protein, typically. That's why whey protein is relatively inexpensive, is that it's a subsidized product and it's a byproduct because we produce more milk in America than we need. But basically, there's two types of protein in milk. There's casein and albumin protein. Albumin protein is the same protein that's in an egg white. Casein protein is what is coagulated through cheese making. And so it's like the primary protein in cheese. And then albumin protein is a secondary protein, so it's available in lower quantities, and that's what whey protein is. So whey used to be the liquid that comes off of cheese, and it's actually cool. As a baker, I love to bake, and like a lot of old-fashioned baking recipes will use whey because it's like slightly acid. It's an old-fashioned way of like getting your biscuits to be lighter. You can use it in pie crust. It's fantastic in bread. So it adds protein, so it adds structure to your matrix, to your flour matrix, but it also makes it really delicious. So when you make cheese, you add rennet or a coagulant, which takes the casein proteins, which are long and stringy in the milk, and then it makes them curl up. And as they curl up, they trap fat. And that becomes the curd, soft curd. So imagine kind of like what a farmer's cheese or like a mozzarella tastes like. That's what curd's like. Then you cut the curd and you heat it up, and then the albumin protein comes out, and that's the whey. And so whey is a byproduct of cheese making, although in the US, as I mentioned, a lot of whey comes from our excess milk production, because it can be extracted from milk or from cheese. So in your liquid whey, when I worked in dairies, we would take the liquid whey and we make ricotta out of it, which is a traditional, whey-based cheese. Because whey you can coagulate through heat and acid, whereas casein you coagulate with just that rennet. They're going to talk about cheese for hours, guys. We should have like do a podcast. Cheese days go down.
Wow.
Yeah, the whey-based cheeses too. There's some really, from a health perspective, they're super digestible. They're not very common anymore. And the ricottas that you get in America now are whole milk ricotta. And I find they kind of give me that icky whole milk feeling of like, I don't know if you have experience when you eat ricotta, it's like kind of like a gut bomb. But if you get a traditional whey-based ricotta, there's one farm in California that makes it called Bellwether, which is extremely light and like super digestible. You can eat a ton of it. It's great. It's just whey. It's basically just whey. And they sell it in like in a traditional basket. It's probably like $8 or $9 for a basket, so it's expensive, but it's super high in protein and really it's a fabulous food. So whey-based cheese is you can find a baked Italian ricotta at a specialty store. That's another one. It's a whey-based cheese, and so it's just really high in protein, lower in fat, and a bit more digestible. When people struggle with dairy, they're typically struggling with lactose and sometimes with casein. So lactose is, a lot of people know the issues with lactose, but casein is the secondary trigger why people struggle with dairy. And so whey-based stuff tends to be just a lot more digestible, just like egg whites. It's exactly the same protein.
I feel like I've been missing out on so much of my life because the cheese I eat is such low quality.
Hey, can we fix that?
Yeah, I think we should.
Just slices of American cheese. Velveeta.
Costco.
We've talked.
Though. You can get good price.
I should probably look at those.
Yeah. They've got amazing, like great quality cheese. And there's so many great, the kind of bummer is that, in Europe, all farmers get a tax cut. Like all farmers basically don't pay taxes, and tax rates are really high in Europe. It's not related to what type of farmer you are. It's just if you are a farmer. So European cheesemakers can produce it's just cheaper for the type of quality. So American cheesemakers, I don't shout out that many American cheeses because a lot of them are really, really high priced, and it's not their fault. It's just that they're competing against guys who basically get a pretty big subsidy. So unfortunately, the subsidies in the US are concentrated in a few crops, and they don't support broadly all farmers. So our European, cheesemakers have just a real, like a 25% kind of savings against the American one. So if you're wondering why you can go and get like what seems like a really good, like high quality artisan cheese from Europe, and it's still cheaper even though being imported than American cheese, it's just because they don't pay taxes. They get these big tax cuts for all European farmers. So you've really kind of stacked the deck against some of our smaller American farmers with that decision.
Where can people find out more about your delicious meats?
Belcampo.com. And I'm going to hook you guys up. I can't.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to send you all so much meat. Can you all three send me your addresses just by email so I can get you product? But for our listeners too, Belcampo.com is our website. On Instagram, we're at Belcampo Meat Co. And I am at Anya Fernald. And I share a lot of meat-based recipes and kind of like cooking for health type of recipes on my feed. And then Belcampo is really about our farm, our values, and our operation.
Wow.
We got to come check out that farm. We're in Sacramento. What are you, 6 hours away or something? Or how far away? 2 hours?
Yeah, I'm not even 6. I mean, I drove up from Oakland yesterday and it was 4.5 hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I'd love to go tour that place. That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll absolutely come up and hostess you guys and cook you dinner. We do events here all summer long. I've got really nice facilities. I have like glamping tents and houses and a lot of different options. So
cool.
Let's make it May of next year. It's I say that because it's getting really cold right now, and it's pretty cold through like mid-April. It actually snows here through June. So it's chillier, but it'll be beautiful starting in May.
Great. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Yeah. Thank you.
Awesome.
Guys.
Thank you.
Awesome. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, it looks like our Zoom got messed up.
It got froze.
Our Zoom's frozen too.
Well,
she's
yeah. No, well, it was funny because she said that our screen had went black.
Oh,
yeah.
I was like, oh no, our Zoom's virtue signaling.
the black box.
Yeah.
I didn't get that joke before.
There we go.
Yo.
The cool thing though is I was recording on our end, but that was dope.
Man, I learned so much when she went on that, like what you need to look for in terms of chicken, beef, and pork. It's like, wow, I didn't realize organic doesn't really mean that much.
Next time you go to the grocery store, ask them, say, I want to get cheese that has like little hard crusty stuff in it. They'll know what you're talking about.
Really?
At Costco, yeah, they'll know what you're talking about.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then
well, if I got a cheese person in your store.
Yeah.
But they have them in Costco.
Okay.
They got cheese people in there.
His name's Morgan Spurlock. The Super Size Me 2 documentary, it's free on YouTube.
Ooh.
Yeah, you should check it out because a lot of the stuff she was saying, and what's interesting is like you look at everything with like is that real? Like, or is this because the documentary's trying to be more interesting? But a lot of the stuff she said kind of just like reiterated what was shown in the documentary about like all the labels being just total BS.
Damn.
Yeah, and it's one of those documentaries, and I learned about this from Chris Bell, because he's like, you start filming for one thing, and then all of a sudden in the middle of it, like the whole thing changes to something else. And that's kind of what happened with this documentary. He sets out to like start his own fast food chicken restaurant, like a healthy version or whatever. And then it uncovers all kinds of weird, nasty secrets about the chicken farming industry. And a lot of it was, some of it, I should say, was some of the labels, saying like no hormones or whatever. It's like, well, yeah, they haven't been doing that for a long time. What they have done is just they breed the chickens a certain way, so that way they just keep getting fatter and fatter. And then, all the stuff that she told us today with like cutting off their beaks and stuff.
God dang. When she said that, I was I see why these ethical vegans are like, I don't want to eat that. Like, I didn't know they cut off chicken beaks.
Yeah, that's fucked up, dude.
That's horrible. And they're in the dark beakless, just going around. That's horrible.
Even John Cena can't handle it. He fell over.
Yeah, he fainted.
He fainted.
God, pass the fuck out.
When she was talking about the chlorine, though, because I know exactly.
I know that is.
Yeah. And I'm like...
It's funny because when she was mentioning like the stringiness that you have in beef, like I haven't experienced that with Piedmontese at all. And I remember after she mentioned it, I'm like, I remember what that was like when I used to buy store beef. Like that was just normal when you had that like that big string of beef with every few cuts.
I don't want to spit this out, but I have to.
I could just swallow it, but pause. Go ahead.
No.
I'm a fucking kid.
Yeah, we're children. But no, like growing up, like I remember I would kind of get bummed if we're having steaks, because I would have to like deal with that, like all the tendons and all the nastiness. And I thought it was all fat. Like I didn't know. But then, having some higher quality cuts, and it's like, oh wait,
Piedmontese, it's really rare. I think it's really rare that I have to like cut anything away or, I mean, I think almost every single time I eat it, I can eat the whole thing.
Yeah. I've never experienced that, but like when she mentioned that, I'm like, it's been so long, but I remember I remember that.
Yeah.
And chicken too. Like I haven't bought chicken in a while, but the runniness, you can get the white stuff. Like now I know it's chlorine.
I want to say it's like, oh man, hopefully I don't butcher this, but I think it's only like $5.99 for a 10-pound bag of chicken breast.
I remember when I like,
because that's what I eat. And I ate a bunch last night and it was really good. And now I'm upset that I'm eating chlorine.
Got that chlorine in your stomach.
That could explain quite a bit.
So actually, I'm curious, Andrew, how much chicken have you always eaten quite a bit of chicken?
Nope.
No? Nope. Okay. This is okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, growing up, I told you guys before on the podcast, I just ate like crap.
Yeah.
And then when I started being more health conscious, I did try to do the chicken and rice, because that's what bodybuilders ate. And like my stomach would get upset, like because I was not used to eating higher proteins and like better quality food. But no, I was always just a fan of like hamburgers. So like a lot of my protein came from that. And then now it's a lot of chicken.
Yeah. Dang.
Yeah. Chicken and eggs, egg whites.
I learned a lot.
That was great. Yeah.
It really was. I now understand what pasteurized means. Pastured. Wow.
Take us on out of here, Andrew.
I will. Thank you, everybody, for checking out today's episode. Sincerely appreciate it. Please hit that like button if you guys are still with us. Please make sure you're following the podcast at Mark Bell's Power Project on Instagram, at MB Power Project on Twitter. We're on, obviously, here on YouTube, so please subscribe here. We're on Facebook, LinkedIn, and I believe that's it for right now. My Instagram is at I am Andrew Z. And Nsima, if people want to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
And Nsima Inyang on Instagram and YouTube, and Nsima Inyang on Twitter. And also, I haven't been on Instagram at all this week because my phone broke.
That's right. We're on your burner now.
Yeah, I'm on my boner, but we're on my burner. But I can't get to my Instagram from this phone because it's not the same number. So anyone that follows that Smooth Panther calendar, it's just because I can't get to that Instagram.
He's got
Nothing's there. By the way, I have this weird thing when I say certain words, like I was saying cream the other day and I accidentally said queen. Like I say things like a baby sometimes, and I've been called out on it. And I'm like, shit. Quedit. I said quedit the other day.
You're like, I need to take my time.
Like, give me some quedit. I'm like, fuck. All right, Mark, I'm sorry.
At Mark Smelly Bell. Strength is never weakness. Weakness is never strength. Catch you guys later.
We're a bunch of children.